In Africa, some dictators have ruled for decades, like Teodoro Obiang Nguema, the president of Equatorial Guinea, who has been ruling for 44 years. However, these rulers and doctors often seize power when they are in their late 50s, 60s, or even 70s. But something different happened in Sierra Leone in 1992, when a boy became the president, becoming the youngest head of state in history. His name was Valentine Strasser, the man who seized power at the age of 25, much like a dictator, and ruled the country for 4 years until he met a shocking end. He would attend meetings, wear suits, and make policies, becoming a president we only watch in movies. Initially, he was a soldier, but he changed his fate in a series of events which you will know about in this video. So, how was a junior-ranking soldier capable of seizing power and becoming the president of Sierra Leone? Let's know about that in this video. Valentine Essegragbo Melvin Strasser was born on April 26, 1967, in Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. His parents were part of the Creole ethnic group. When Strasser was born, Sierra Leone was under a parliamentary government with Sir Albert Margai serving as the prime minister. He spent his early years in the neighborhood of Allentown, situated in the far eastern part of Freetown. Strasser completed his secondary education at the Sierra Leone Grammar School in Freetown, graduating in 1985 at the young age of 18. During his time in secondary school, Strasser distinguished himself as a gifted student, particularly excelling in subjects like mathematics and chemistry. Then started his military career. In 1985, right after graduating from secondary school, Strasser enlisted in the Republic of Sierra Leone Military Forces (RSLMF) at the age of 18. This was during the presidency of Siaka Stevens. He underwent military training as a cadet officer at the Benguema Military Training Academy, located just outside Freetown in Benguema. Following his training, Strasser was commissioned as an officer in the Sierra Leone Army, an exceptional achievement at the age of 19. He was then stationed at a military barracks in Daru, situated in the Kailahun district in the eastern part of Sierra Leone. The Revolutionary United Front RUF, led by Foday Sankoh, initiated its first attack on March 25, 1991, in the villages of Bwedu, located in the Kailahun district. Strasser, along with other soldiers already based in a military barracks in Kailahun, was tasked with leading and countering the rebellion incited by the RUF. Before President Momo was ousted by his successor, Valentine Strasser actively fought against the Liberian invasion in Sierra Leone, particularly in the eastern and southern regions of the country. Strasser's efforts included combating domestic rebels, often referred to as Sobels. President Momo's tenure was relatively short-lived, as he failed to address the demands of the Sierra Leonean people. During his regime, the population wanted a more cooperative political system, feeling that Momo had not brought about significant changes from his predecessor. From 1968 onward, Sierra Leone had been under the control of the All People's Congress. Following a controversial constitutional referendum in 1978 suspected of being manipulated, this party became the sole legal entity. The country was infested by corruption and mismanagement under both Momo's presidency and his predecessor, Siaka Stevens. In March 1991, Sierra Leone was thrust into the Sierra Leone Civil War, a conflict that threw the government against the invading Revolutionary United Front, led by Foday Sankoh. Government soldiers on the front line suffered from inadequate supplies and poor nourishment, and in some cases they went without pay for 3 months. Captain Strasser bore witness to these dreadful conditions while serving with a unit fighting against the rebels. His discontent deepened after sustaining a shrapnel wound that couldn't be promptly treated. In response to these dire circumstances, Strasser and other junior officers orchestrated a coup. They led a convoy to the capital, Freetown, and took control of the State House, where Momo's office was located, even though Momo had not yet arrived. The State House was briefly reclaimed by loyal troops, but was soon recaptured by the mutineers. When Momo was found, he was airlifted into exile in Guinea. Only a few young soldiers had done what seemed impossible, taking charge of the country. Joseph Opala, an American historian who had dedicated much of his adult life to the country, was apprehended and sent to the American ambassador to confirm whether the U.S. government would acknowledge the new regime. African-American Ambassador Johnny Young indicated that though it was not the standard practice, an exception would be made in this case due to the lack of democratic election of the previous government and the dire state of the country. After that, all political parties were banned, and the National Provisional Ruling Council was established as the new government. This led to the dissolution of the parliament. The 1992 Sierra Leonean coup d'etat marked the overthrow of the Sierra Leonean government by a group of young military officers, led by the 25-year-old Captain Valentine Strasser on April 29, 1992, which resulted in the removal of President Joseph Saidu Momo from power. Captain Valentine Strasser, at the youthful age of 25, unexpectedly found himself leading the nation. 2 years into his tenure, Strasser, Africa's youngest dictator, successfully navigated a civil war, survived 2 coup attempts, and faced global condemnation for his execution of adversaries, media censorship, and the conscription of boys as young as 12 into the army. In addition, he supported a 2-year transition to democracy, initiated the cleanup of the capital city, resumed tax collections, reduced street crime, downsized the civil service by a quarter, and lowered inflation from an annual rate of 115% to under 15%. Thrust into the public eye, Strasser, then 27, along with his fellow ruling junta members in their 20s, was acutely aware of the historical judgment they faced as the first African leaders born after colonial rule. "We all believe this was for posterity," Major Julius Maada Bio, 29, Strasser's second-in-command, expressed. "I assumed a position of significant responsibility. I embraced my duties," he said, while paradoxically adding, "but as a young man, I couldn't say I enjoyed them." Strasser and his peers came of age during the corrupt dictatorships of the 1970s and 1980s, a period when the education system deteriorated to the point where students had to take their chairs home to secure a seat in class the following day. Strasser chose to join the army after completing high school. He rose to power in the post-Cold War era, during which the world's sole superpower could demand democracy and free markets in exchange for financial aid. This prompted most of the 48 sub-Saharan African nations at that time to experiment with representative government, with many facing difficulties. By any measure, the prospect of Strasser's government peacefully transitioning to a model democracy within 2 years seemed unlikely. Nonetheless, this didn't discourage the world from offering an intensive civics lesson. Hence, Strasser found himself bombarded with advice from Nigeria, the continent's largest military dictatorship, the United States and its allies, as well as the International Monetary Fund, the global arbiter of economic aid. His acceptance of the painful IMF restructuring conditions came with its rewards. Waste disposal was financed by the Germans, the British helped in organizing tax collections, most businesses were run by ethnic Lebanese, and an advisory council of internationally respected Leoneans drafted a proposed constitution they gently encouraged Strasser to support. His junta members, recognized by their trademark attire of sunglasses and berets, also received regular counsel from the fellow West African nation of Ghana. In Ghana, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings had turned his own young soldiers' coup into an election victory. Nigeria played a crucial role in assisting Strasser in fighting a rebel war that had paralyzed the diamond industry in the south and east. Nigerian troops were also responsible for the defense of Freetown, including Strasser's home. The Nigerian dictator, General Sani Abacha, had set a somewhat negative example for Strasser by ousting a civilian government, dissolving elected legislatures, and rolling back a decade of economic restructuring last year. They had their merits. General Bio, Strasser's second-in-command, commented about the diverse influences, but they had their flaws as well. Nonetheless, the boys, as they were known, had limited experience with democracy or the outside world. Bio would glare sullenly from behind his office desk while a press aide scolded a reporter for asking inappropriate questions. Dealing with them required extreme tact, noted Tejan Kaba, former manager of the UN Development Program in New York and chairman of the Advisory Council. The Oxford-educated Kaba, age 62, revealed that the Advisory Council subtly applied pressure to the Strasser government so as not to embarrass them. The council promoted the 170-page draft constitution by canvassing villages with posters and slogans in the indigenous languages. The schedule called for a public referendum on the document in May 1995, with plans for the election of a multi-party government in 1996. The council acknowledged that selling democracy was not an easy task in one of the world's poorest nations, where the life expectancy was 42 years, 86% of the population was illiterate, and infant mortality rates ranked among the world's highest. Young Leoneans, who had embraced Strasser as one of their own, had been toughened by years of deprivation and repression. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Paul Camara, a 36-year-old human rights activist and journalist who had been jailed 3 times by Strasser's predecessor, and once by Strasser himself, said, "The harsh culture of survival over the past 30 years had created a situation where people only focused on staying alive, not democracy." Strasser was meticulous in his avoidance of the press and declined all interview requests. Those who interacted with him regularly observed his growing isolation and noted his reduced involvement in daily decision-making. But Bio took charge of presiding over cabinet meetings. However, despite his reclusive tendencies, Strasser remained popular in this West African nation with a population of 4.5 million at that time. The country had a unique history, established 2 centuries ago by freed slaves from Britain, the United States, and Jamaica. Sierra Leone, while undeniably breathtaking, grappled with poverty. It boasted pristine ocean beaches surrounded by mist-covered mountains, attracting European tourists who frequented beachfront hotels and leisurely strolled the sandy shores. The coastal capital, Freetown, presented a paradox. It was a clean city, yet astonishingly disorganized, with colonial-era buildings in various states of decay. The narrow dirt streets were constantly congested and often closed off whenever Strasser set out for a drive. Sierra Leone had achieved independence from Britain in 1961, but had endured a prolonged decline marked by coups and contested elections that led to numerous casualties. In 1985, Major General Joseph Momoh, the army commander, had assumed control, plunging the nation into a state of perpetual fuel shortages, food scarcities, and rampant corruption, which siphoned off 90% of the diamond production. In 1991, a rebellion started, forcing 1.5 million people to flee their homes. Due to Momo's inability to pay or feed his soldiers, junior officers grew discontented and became agitators. By May 1992, the situation had deteriorated to such an extent that the United Nations designated Sierra Leone as the world's most inhospitable place to live. That's when, a few days later, 9 junior officers led a convoy of 60 soldiers into town, demanding their pay at gunpoint. The deeply unpopular Momoh, with virtually no support left, fled the country. The mutineers, a group primarily composed of uneducated men hailing from rural villages, approached the more charismatic Strasser to lead a provisional military government. He quickly gained a reputation as a savior among the people, even though, at times, they overlooked or even celebrated his regime's initial instances of human rights violations. These violations notably included the execution of 29 alleged coup plotters on the beaches of Freetown without the benefit of a trial. This action led to Britain suspending its aid to the nation. Although these abuses were eventually brought under control, and Britain resumed its assistance in January, the house arrest of 30 politicians continued, and approximately 20 newspapers remained shuttered. In addition, 4 journalists faced prosecution on charges of sedition for citing a Swedish newspaper's allegations that Strasser and his associates were involved in the illicit trade of diamonds in Brussels. Despite some modest improvements in living conditions, the country experienced virtually no economic growth. Investors opted to steer clear of a nation mired in conflict and led by soldiers in their 20s. John Benjamin, a former businessman at 41 years of age, stood as the sole civilian member of the ruling junta, and the only one exceeding the age of 29. He staunchly contended that the young government's stability was no less dependable than any other in West Africa. "I genuinely believe they have matured," he remarked. "All our colleagues have taken their roles more seriously. They are acutely aware of their place in history, and they are resolute in their determination not to fail. When you are in your 20s and you make a mistake, you have a longer time to live with the consequences." However, Strasser's era came to an end in 1996. In January 1996, after nearly 4 years in power, Strasser found himself ousted in yet another military coup. This time, the coup was initiated by his fellow NPRC members, who had become dissatisfied with his handling of the peace process. The uprising was led by his deputy, Brigadier General Julius Maada Bio, along with Colonel Tom Nyuma and Captain Kamba Manda. On January 16, 1996, Bio orchestrated a military coup, resulting in the removal of Captain Valentine Strasser from power. This coup stemmed from a disagreement within the ruling Supreme Council of State concerning whether to prioritize the pursuit of peace with the RUF before proceeding with the scheduled multi-party elections in March 1996. The debate also revolved around whether junta members should be allowed to participate in the elections or be disqualified. The coup garnered support from several high-ranking NPRC officers, including Colonel Tom Nyuma, Lieutenant Colonel Kamba Manda, Lieutenant Colonel Reginald Glover, Lieutenant Colonel Idris Kamara, and Lieutenant Colonel Karefa Kargbo. Captain Valentine Strasser, then the leader of the NPRC and the military head of state of Sierra Leone, was apprehended by his own military bodyguards at gunpoint, individuals who were responsible for his protection. He was promptly transported into exile in a military helicopter bound for Conakry, the neighboring country of Guinea. After his overthrow, Strasser was awarded a fellowship by the UN to pursue a law degree at the University of Warwick in Coventry, England. However, he discontinued his studies after 18 months. In 2000, Strasser's application for asylum in England was rejected. He then attempted to enter the Gambia, but was denied entry there as well. Eventually, he returned to Sierra Leone, where he lived in poverty and relied on a small pension in Grafton, situated to the east of Freetown. He worked at the ICT Institute, where he provided computer skills training to young people. In January 2019, he fell severely ill and was transported to Ghana for medical treatment. Due to peripheral artery disease, he had to undergo the partial amputation of his left leg. After a period of rehabilitation, he returned to Sierra Leone in July 2021 and was given an apartment by President Bayo. However, allegations arose that the government was keeping Strasser under house arrest, as claimed by Amadou Makalo Koita, a member of the opposition All People's Congress. Valentine Strasser, who once held the distinction of being the world's youngest head of state, now had to answer for war crimes. Strasser had ruled Sierra Leone with a legacy of violence from 1992 to 1996, and had been residing in London since 1996. Becoming the world's youngest head of state at the age of 25, he had cultivated a striking image often seen in Ray-Ban sunglasses and designer clothing. Despite widespread criticism of his human rights record from organizations such as Amnesty International, the young leader had swiftly forged relationships with world leaders, including Bill Clinton, John Major, and Nelson Mandela. However, a mere 8 months into his leadership, Strasser's armed forces executed 26 political opponents on a beach outside Freetown. Now, after losing all power, he had to answer for that. The international community was appalled, prompting Britain to immediately suspend its aid to the country. Amnesty International reported that individuals suspected of supporting the rebel Revolutionary United Front had been subjected to torture. Government soldiers were accused of committing atrocities. By January 1995, state radio was encouraging citizens to have sticks and stones and machetes ready, as hundreds poured into Freetown, recounting tales of torture, mutilation, and cannibalism. Ousted from power in 1996, Strasser led a nomadic existence in the UK, while awaiting a decision on his asylum application. He abandoned his law studies at Warwick University, having initially entered the country on a student visa. "I wouldn't rule him out at this point," said an acquaintance of Strasser based in London on Friday night. "He still has a support base in Sierra Leone, and any efforts to return him there would need to be meticulously considered." Strasser's plea for asylum in the United Kingdom, his home since 1996, was rejected, compelling him to depart from the country. Consequently, Strasser's situation deteriorated as he grappled with the absence of a dependable source of income. His financial struggles grew increasingly burdensome. During this period, a particularly moving and widely publicized incident took place. Strasser was spotted in a public location, begging for food. This occurrence served as a poignant symbol of his stark decline from the position of head of state to a state of severe poverty. It captured the attention of both the media and the general public. Strasser's life had taken a drastically different path from the days when he was recognized for his extravagant image and leadership style. The images of him seeking food acted as a stark reminder of the hurdles faced by leaders who tumble from their previously prominent roles, evoking a mix of compassion and critique from various quarters. Later, Sierra Leone's President Bayo, the same man who had ousted Strasser, offered him a house as part of an initiative to help him overcome substantial challenges, which included financial difficulties and health problems. The intention behind providing him with this house was to furnish him with a place to live and to extend support as he attempted to rebuild his life. Strasser's life in this new residence likely involved a period of adaptation as he made the transition from his previous circumstances. The house provided him with a stable and secure place to call home, which was of great significance to Strasser, especially following his return to Sierra Leone from abroad. However, it's worth noting that there were allegations suggesting that he might have been subject to house arrest. This hints at the possibility that his living situation may not have been entirely unrestricted. The specific details of Strasser's life in the house, as provided by President Bio, hinged on the agreed-upon terms and any potential constraints imposed by the government. That's how the youngest president in history found himself in the brutal world in his old age. What do you think? Could Valentine Strasser extend his rule and stay as the president for decades? Was his period different because he was just a boy, or much like other leaders of that time? Let us know your thoughts on whether there is a younger president than Valentine Strasser. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.